Well, first thing I'm going to do is we also have 4 panelists with us, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the end, and you can introduce yourself, and then we'll work our way down.
I am Matthew Raybourn. I'm a sales engineer for Inductive Automation.
J.C. Harrison, Director of Systems Engineering for Roeslein and Associates out of St. Louis, Missouri.
I'm D. Brown with Brown Engineers. We're an electrical, mechanical, and automation consulting firm in Little Rock.
And Jim Minue, Rockwell Automation.
Okay. Obviously, if anybody has any questions, certainly raise your hand, and Alan will help take care of you. But, oh, okay.
Oh, no, we got to get it on tape.
What do you say, Chantel? We can't hear you.
Yeah.
Oh, hell. Here we go.
Dan, I was just wondering, with those data concentrators, can they provide output? I get that you're bringing all the inputs from the various, equipment, but can you use that to provide output as well?
Yeah, we actually created them purely to suck data in, but since they're full-blown PLCs, they've got all the ability for analog and digital outputs and all that stuff. So we actually are driving a number of indicators, specifically like alarms and stuff. Like for the water meters, we've got status lights that are coming back out of the PLC down to where the meters are, the meter readouts are. We've got horns. So yeah, it's a full functional control system that we just happen to use to basically get status of things that don't have their own control systems or have control systems that aren't compatible with our systems.
I guess to follow up on Chantel's question, does anybody use anything either in your plants or machines that's similar? And conversely, I know that from a systems perspective or from a Rockwell and inductive automation perspective, you offering anything that's similar? I know it's control pack logics.
Yeah, there's a lot of different options, and as Kathy was mentioning in her presentations, as you get into legacy systems, there could be special protocols, buses. If the systems are proprietary in a lot of cases, then we can overlay, a IO or a compact Logix or some of the Logix platforms to do that. Again, using that as your data concentrator to get it up to where you need it.
Anybody else? Well, one other question I have, and it's certainly going to ask it from 2 directions. One, of course, is the types of resistance that you find from OT to IT-OT convergence, and then, of course, the type of resistance you find from IT for IT-OT convergence. And we'll start at the end.
Yeah, that's a funny question because you get hit by both sides. So when we started this journey, I actually worked for engineering, and it was pretty easy to get OT on board because they saw the value right out of the gate, especially with the MES capabilities where we could show them what was going on. IT was a little bit trickier because I was touching their systems and they didn't like that very much. They don't want engineers touching the IT systems. So what they did is my CEO promoted me and put an OT group under the CIO. So now I actually work for the CIO, and OT and IT both have directors. And it's to the point now, there was some pushback. They called us like shadow engineers or shadow IT, whatever it is, because we were hijacking their systems and doing stuff that they didn't want us to do with them. But now, IT is actually pushing projects to us that were historically IT because we do them better. We know, for instance, reporting, we know what the end user wants, even though the end user might not understand what they want in a way to be able to explain to IT. So we took over the majority of the reporting for financials and everything because we're better at it. But now, I mean, and it helps when you're owned by one guy and he likes it. And if he likes it, everybody has to like it or they'll be gone.
Well, it's interesting because as being an owner, it would be interesting from your perspective. You do have an owner.
I wish I had that luxury to just say, if you don't like my way, you can go, because it doesn't always work that way. We're a smaller company, so we don't have all those plants. But when you have 35 people, even within that smaller setting, there is opposition to just the plain old word change. So for us, it wasn't so much stay away from my stuff. It was more of a, I don't understand how what I do can even work with what you do. It was more of a resistance from our shop floor and the OT side of the business, understanding what IT could really do for them. They understood that there was technology out there, but they didn't really understand that it could help their day to day. So once we got over that gap and the culture shifted to everyone working together, it was a much easier transition. And now it's something that can just be openly brought up and everyone's working together on it. It sounds like a kumbaya moment, but it really does work that way once the culture's in place.
Does Dana have any kumbaya moments?
Quite a bit, yeah. So I think when I first joined Dana, it was about 3 years ago. I joined under the IT organization, so I reported directly to the director of light vehicle manufacturing, and they were on their third attempt at an MES system, right? So they had customer requirements for traceability data, genealogy data, and they were going down the third iteration of this attempt, and it was not going well. So the OT group, our operations team, was very, we'll say unhappy, but it was much more than that. And then that drove quite a bit of input from that group to then change my role, and I started to report to engineering. So having that IT background, I began to work for engineering, and we went through and started our fourth iteration of an MES and OE and all that. And that's when we brought in JC. And I was given a very short leash. So I said I had one plant that I had to digitize, and that was one of our facilities in Ohio. We brought JC in on a Friday afternoon, and by Sunday we had meaningful data. And then by the end of that experiment, the revenue numbers that were generated from the data that we could provide was pretty much the all they needed to know was that we were generating money now. So any pushback that we had was now gone. So that was our kumbaya moment when it impacted the bottom line.
And Monty from City of Hot Springs, is that something? What do you have?
Well, our kumbaya moment was basically when we started our master plan. We communicated well with that department, that we included our IT department in that plan, so they were on board from the very start.
Great. Do we have a question?
Yeah, so my question's for Remus and JC. You mentioned you're working with Microsoft, and it sounds like you're kind of pushing towards a cloud infrastructure long term. What's it been like from a communications perspective and migration for, say, if you've had legacy server systems and you're migrating data there? Are you running things in parallel with the on-prem stuff and then, pushing certain reporting data up to the cloud? And then how are you sharing that communication wise? Like, are you using an SD-WAN technology to bring those two together? And then JC, working with Dana and then other customers, what have you seen about your edge of network stuff, talking to cloud stuff, solutions like that, where customers are having to bring their IT networks into a wide area network to a cloud hosted solution, and then you've got edge devices out there that you're trying to bring those all the way up to that line?
Yeah, so we're pretty lucky at Dana that we have a strategic partnership with Microsoft, so we get to leverage a lot of their resources, and a lot of the really smart guys to try to solve some of this stuff. We actually did a couple trials to see what it would look like if we just took our Ignition server and just moved it off-prem, took the entire VM stack and put it in the cloud. But we wanted to know what it would look like. It worked. It was high latency. We didn't have a lot of fast update times that we wanted to have, but it worked. So that kind of drove the idea that, okay, the idea is feasible. How do we start to make it happen? And then around that same time, in one of the sessions that we have with Microsoft, they were talking about a new product line that they were coming out with called the Azure Stack Edge, which allows us to take an essence of cloud computing and put it on-prem. So the idea being, as we move forward and test this out, we're going to work hopefully with Microsoft and Ignition to build out what that's going to look like, so that we have a component of Ignition that's living in the Microsoft Azure Stack Edge, so that we can have kind of the same idea, the data concentrator at the plant level, so that we don't have to take all of that traffic that's generating from our plants, because we have one of our plants generates, 50 to 60,000 tags that we're collecting and pulling at every 100 milliseconds or 1 second. That's a lot of traffic to take from a local area network on the plant and try to push it up to cloud. So the idea being is that if we had something local, we could keep that bandwidth tied to the local network and only push what was required, like reporting Anything that we're feeding for global dashboards, enterprise dashboards would go up to the cloud. And then with the built-in security that comes with that device, it's just another check mark that we just don't have to worry about because it's all end-to-end encrypted. The hard drives on the device are encrypted, and it's monumentally cheaper than it would cost us to put a full stack server in there.
So you're pulling at faster rates locally, getting your aggregated data, pushing that up that way. And you feel pretty comfortable with the edge components that you can still move that data, store it locally, and have it historized, trickled back up slowly.
Yeah, I'm comfortable that we'll be able to get it. We're just starting our pilot phase now. We have our central ignition server that gets kind of some reporting features that get fed from each plant using the enterprise gateway and that stuff. But I think with this new technology from Microsoft, we're really going to be able to push a lot of that compute that was originally going to be thought to be cloud. We'll be able to do that nice hybrid approach.
Some other customers really are concentrating on this single point of truth because they've had different locations where they've recorded data, and then they have different reports that are saying that the data is the same, but it's not. And so these edge devices have been the solution to that problem. Try to get the device as close to the PLC, as close to the flow meter, wherever your data source is, and get that device reporting up to whatever your system is, whether it's an on-premise solution or a cloud solution. And we're pushing the suppliers. We have an outstanding relationship with Rockwell, and we're trying to encourage them to get more of their hardware, which is outstanding hardware, to be self-reporting as opposed to needing to have a go-between. So that's kind of where we're going.
Anybody else in the panel want to follow up on that? Or okay, I'd let Alan know if you have any questions. But when I asked the IIoT convergence resistance question to the users, now I'm curious to get the perspective from the suppliers and the systems integrators. So what kind of resistance do you find from either the IT side or the OT side as you're selling Rockwell?
Yeah, I've got 33 years of experience from a systems perspective, and I think it really is it's industry dependent a lot of times. I think, as I heard a lot even in this conference this week, is if you bring these parties together and start having those discussions up front and having them understand the business issues of why you're asking to do this, I think the walls come down and they're a lot more open to have those discussions. I also, a little simplistically on this, but I think about when you're building a house, you're talking about edge devices and things like that. You need to make sure you do your upfront work and not just try to send everything up to the cloud, because it's going to get expensive, and whether somebody's really going to use it. This data has been around a long, long time, and I think you need to filter out or relate it to a business problem and also relate it to your workflow of how you're going to address those workflows.
Yeah, I think as a consulting engineer and system integrator, we see a lot of different conversations in that space. The people conversations have to happen first. You've got to get IT and OT talking together. And each organization that we deal with is a little bit different. Sometimes IT is internal, to the ownership structure. Sometimes it's a third-party IT. And so you've got to get those folks in the room. I think once they realize, when our responsibility for the OT and the systems, real-time data, things that have to happen, generally there's a pretty easy demarcation line of who's going to do what. But I have learned in this day and age, you do need to go to the management level and get their buy-in and approval on everything, because you're starting to make a lot of decisions about how the organization is really going to work long-term. And that's really key to get everybody in the room.
Kind of along the same lines as D. Roeslein is also a manufacturer in addition to being an integrator. And to solve our IIoT solutions in our own company, they put my department in with the IT department in the same area. So the people who work for me and the people who work for IT, they go to lunch together, they have pizza together. This is still a cultural thing and still a people thing. And even if the people on top don't necessarily, the directors and the managers and stuff don't exactly see eye to eye, if you can get the team to where they do things together and then just let them go, a lot of times the team will handle that convergence in spite of the people who run the team.
Okay, Matt.
Yeah, generally when we meet with the customers and we speak with their IT team, the only real resistance at first might be related to, how much data, can their network actually handle this? Sounds like it's going to be a lot, but we work with them through that, and it turns out generally it should be able to handle it, and we can make adjustments, of course, around that. And then security as well, how do you deal with that? But again, we work with them. We draw up what architecture they will need for their solution. And then from the OT side, the only resistance really would be if they think their system's already working well enough, then why change it, of course. But generally when they've, when we're speaking at this point, they have some sort of problem that they need solved. And so once we demonstrate how we can do that, then it's kind of eye-opening, and we can work from there.
Okay. Any other questions from the audience? Okay.
Hi there. I enjoyed the presentations. My question, I wanted to get your thoughts on what comes first. We've heard a lot about starting at the problem. What comes first? Is it the use case for using the data after convergence, can be established, and then chasing after it? Or is it, we've also heard things like data lakes and trying to get data there and then figuring out what to do. And, also, are you afraid of overdoing it and the idea that if once the data is flowing in there, it'll be underutilized and still just be stored?
I think a good way to start, and I know John mentioned in his keynote the idea of pilot purgatory, right? So I think when you're getting the idea to start one of these IIoT convergence projects, you want to pick an area that has some impact, right? Don't pick that one machine that's off in the corner that's nobody's really paying any attention to, because even if you get meaningful data out of that piece of equipment, it's not going to make it much of an impact. So I think you want to start with something that actually has a lot of visibility, and we like to go by the mantra of start small, think big, and scale fast. So I think going down that road, we've been able to quickly prove if you pick that high visibility system, as you get that data, it's very meaningful to a lot of people very quickly.
Yeah, exactly what he said. No, when we started down this journey, I had a vision of what I thought we'd be able to do, and luckily my CIO at the time had a background in high performance manufacturing also, so he knew the benefits of a machine data collection system, a SCADA system, MES, all that, and to prove it out, pick a pain point. Pick the one line that nobody's been able to figure out, what the problem is. And what we did is we picked a pain point at one plant. We fixed the problem, which all of a sudden got everybody's attention. Now they knew that something's worked, right? So then we went to one of our bacon plants. We picked a pain point, which was a high volume microwave cook line for a brand new client who happened to have the name Costco, which is kind of important. And we weren't meeting our targets. So we put the system in and we proved it out. We found what the issues were. We fixed the issues. We developed a performance system around that. And once we got that one line humming, oh yeah, we got 12 more exactly like it. So now it's just rinse, reapply across all the other ones. So that's the easiest way to get buy-in too. If you can fix a pain point for a plant manager, they're going to love you and they're going to allow you to go to the next step and try something else.
And I agree with all of that, but I just caution you, if you are going to take that low-hanging fruit and you're going to go after that big exposure item, make sure you do it right. Because if you don't, you just blew your culture around convergence. And I own other businesses, and I had that happen where we went after the low-hanging fruit, thought we had a win. We went out and gave our results a little too soon, and then our cavemen came out, and a caveman is a citizen against virtually everything. And those cavemen are louder than anyone else in your business to ruin what you just set out. So now you've gone backwards. So I agree with all of what you said, but make sure before you report anything back that you have correct findings.
Was Larry a caveman?
Larry was a caveman at one time, yes.
Okay. Do you have anything, Monty? Or okay. Any other questions from the audience? Well, one of the things that we've talked a lot about with ITOT convergence is obviously how does that as part of digital transformation enable you to use some of the emerging technologies like augmented reality, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, machine learning. So I actually want to go across the board and starting with the suppliers to say, are you able as Rockwell Automation, for example, to leverage some of your other, say AR, VR solutions, maybe through your partnership with PTC, for example, as a result of this?
Yeah, and it's a great point. And Kathy's, she referenced a video. We can actually show this, but again, I equate it to, we put the walls up together on the house, and now we can go hang the curtains on it. Because, and she talked about her Larry, who in April is going to be going away, and that's the exact discussion and dialogue we're in right now is how do we take products like expert capture and use that not only to capture the historical knowledge, but now start to use that as the documentation tool to train people. And so if, the millennials, they'll grab a hold of their cell phone, that's how they learn. And if we have that type of documentation available, it will, we call it stickiness. They'll adapt to it a lot quicker.
Okay, Dee, as far as from an integrator perspective.
Yeah, what keeps coming to mind for me is an example when Monty called me a couple of weeks ago and said, "Hey, I've got this issue I'm looking at, trying to compare a couple of flow meters that something's not adding." And I actually, at the time, he didn't have a report with them both on the same page. And so with an hour, in an hour, we deliver a new report, add some tags, do the totalization, put it on the screen. And so I think the ability to have a software application that can do a little bit of everything, in his presentation, we talked about Ignition and had the luxury of working with a couple of these other guys. I think that's an example of an ability to be very agile in the kinds of solutions that we're talking about.
Yeah, well, when you build upon it, you connect your plant floor and you do the digital transformation from that perspective. You gain the respect by the people watching you, and the reason we come to these conferences and we do these things together is so we can know where we would like to take the customer or ourselves if we're a company, to know where the risks are and to weigh the risk based on whether or not the customer actually needs these new features. But if you do it right the first time, you get the opportunity to build for the next step.
Yeah, so the whole ITOT convergence obviously is fundamental to our entire platform. But in terms of new features coming out, we recently released the HTML-based visualization, so then you can get that whole digital transformation just right on your cell phone. So that's kind of there, and then we will continually improve on our Edge product as well, so that you can get more of that data even easier.
And to some of the speakers, as far as some of your presentations, you covered some of the other emerging technologies that you're beginning to roll out. So we'll start with Dan and see which ones you think are going to get the most traction, say, at Sugarcreek.
Yeah, obviously everybody's talking about machine learning. That's huge. AI, using the cloud, using AWS and Azure and taking all your data, crunching up, having it magically tell you what the answer is and shove it back down. We're playing with that. That works if you know what you're looking at, right? You need to have educated guesses on what the inputs are that are driving the outputs. And unfortunately, in the meat industry, there's a lot of variability in the raw material, right? So you've got fatty versus not fatty, thick versus thin. It's not like cars where you've got a piece of sheet metal you're processing. Pigs aren't rectangular and they're not the same size. So what we're doing more is leveraging like the HTML5 from Ignition. We built a performance system and a manufacturing system in Ignition, and that was all well and good, but we saw how much other stuff it could do that we're leveraging Ignition to do stuff that we had no intention of leveraging Ignition to do. So we're building safety dashboards you can pull up on your phone, maintenance dashboards you can pull up on your phone. Those aren't hidden devices. Those are hidden existing, legacy databases, and they're just pulling the data out and formatting it in a manner that's relevant to the end user. So, obviously, with Perspective, we can build dashboards that are custom to whoever logs in. So if the owner logs in, he gets one set of dashboards. If I log in, I get a different set of dashboards. and we're really leveraging the mobile aspect of Ignition to do things we had no intention of doing. So that's really what our next step is.
We're starting to play quite a bit in the world of big data and AI and machine learning. We have a couple pilots going that are just starting off, and we have one that we're pretty confident is going to make a big impact in production. We're using artificial intelligence to make parameter decisions. So traditionally, there was a process in one of our equipment where the PLC would just make a quick math calculation and give us a result. What we found through big data and AI and looking at thousands and thousands of points of data, we can make that decision through AI, and it's actually way more accurate than the PLC could ever be in their simple calculation. So I think that's just one of the ways I think we're starting to look at that. And then we're also exploring the idea of taking not just process data in the AI and machine learning world, but taking a look at our OEE data as well, because we know that process parameters will affect quality for sure, 100%. But maybe there's an aspect of the machine itself. Maybe there's a fault that happens a lot that's affecting quality. Traditionally, those two pieces of data are completely siloed. With technology like data lakes and big data, you can start to compare those pieces of data across each other and see how some of that data interacts.
One of the things we did early on, we have an AMI meter reading system in the city of Hot Springs where all of our meters wake up at night, midnight, and send their readings in. We were able to put some of these devices on some of those 3,400 lift stations that we have. We were able to put those on there and communicate with a different system back to Ignitions to just give us a simple report. Hey, is it a high wet level? That's all I needed to know on those 3,400 grinder stations. I didn't need control over them. I just need to know when there was a problem. So that's one of the ways that we did that is we used the census meter reading system to send us the signal back to Ignitions and sends us a text message and gives us the alerts. Of course, we use that same process, through some of our larger 88 major lift stations. We want more controls over those. So, but on the smaller grinder stations, it wasn't necessary. All we needed was a small input. So that's what we were able to do.
For us, the augmented reality is really our focal point right now, both internally and externally. We want to take that augmented reality to help train through service manuals and other documents in the past that we've used that were just on paper to become actual app-based applications for our customers.
Any other questions from the audience? Well, then what we'll do is we'll ask a final question for all of you, and it's always the ending Monday morning quarterback question. Hard to say as a Patriots fan, but if you were to certainly give anybody advice as to things that you may want to think about or you might do differently, and I'll take it from the user perspective as well as from the sales and engineering perspective. And I'll start with Dan, and we'll work our way right down. But the Monday morning quarterback, what would you do differently?
Yeah, so if anybody is out there and they're considering, a new SCADA solution or a new MES solution, there's ample opportunity to try before you buy, especially with Ignition. Ignition's free to use. It's a 2-hour trial. You can make a complete. Actually, what we initially did is we modeled a whole department using their free trial before we paid a dime. So you can actually figure out if it's the right solution for you just by playing with it. And I would recommend that you do that before you make a decision based on, one vendor. I'd also, if you're going to use an integrator, we developed everything in-house. If you're going to use an integrator, talk to multiple integrators and see if there's a common theme on what they recommend. Because the best guy might not be the best guy for your application.
Actually, we'll start with Matt, and we'll work our way down from.
So from our perspective as a software supplier, I would say the best thing is to put that extra thought up front when you plan out your system, so that you don't have to go back later and change everything. So and that's where me specifically as well as a sales engineer, I would do that for the customer, or if I'm working with the integrator, and just make sure every little piece makes sense.
I think for me, it's community, right? The reason we all attend these conferences and these sessions is to learn from people that have been down that road, have done it before. Don't be afraid to reach out. There's tons of companies out there that are going down this digital transformation route. And it's the reason that forums like this exist. I think as much as you can, reach out to your peers and learn as much as you can, as often as you can.
Yeah, I would probably give some advice. Most all software and solution packages have hooks, and they should. If the software is any good or if the solution's any good, it should have a hook. But be very mindful as you're looking for your software of handcuffs, to where if the software gets you in, and if you were to let go, you'd be back at square one. Be very careful of those software and solution packages.
My solution is pretty simple. I surround myself with very smart people. I've made a living doing that for 32 years. So, master plans are very critical in our business. We have to plan way in advance, but we update those master plans every 5 years. We just make sure that we have all the right people in the room when we're talking about those particular sections. I have a lot of master plans. So, and Dee's done one of them for us. So we just make sure we have the right people in the room and we communicate.
I think it's interesting thinking about the last 10 years or so where things in the municipal water, wastewater, and electric utility industry have changed a lot, where it used to be we're just going to stay air gapped and that'll be the secure thing that we're going to do. And in this day and age with phones and tablets and everybody in the organization needs the data all the time, it's like you're going to have to work more with IT and open those systems up. But you've also got to build in some security to make sure certain things are protected. And so I would encourage you to be, doing that from the front, because a lot of the legacy systems out there can be, difficult to protect.
My advice, and I don't know that it's that I'm looking back and saying we did anything wrong. My advice would be, when you start on your journey, make sure you can do incremental change. Along all the lines what everyone has said, yes, you should have a master plan out there, but your change shouldn't be as a broad stroke over what it is that you do. I would make it as incremental as you can and try and break it out just in case you do have to go backwards for any reason. And as far as picking your software, I agree with the hook and have been there and have been handcuffed and had to start over. So that's why I think incremental change is key to when you're going through this process, but don't let it handcuff you to your design either. When I say incremental change, I don't mean a small shift that takes 10 years. I'm talking give yourself a break, make sure what you have put in place works before you move on to the next.
Yeah, start slow, start small, don't get enamored by blinky lights, and really start with the business value and problem. And if you do that, you'll have success. Don't try to tackle the whole elephant.
Okay. Well, please join me in giving the panel and the speakers a round of applause. I think they all did a great job, so thank you very much.